Their conversation is just outside. Thank you. We are going to keep going. We have a little bit of a scheduling change here. I just want to make note of it for you. What we're going to do, because there have been more votes called this afternoon in the House of Representatives, we're going to take all four of our House of Representatives speakers and compress their speaking slots over the next hour. So we'll have a 2:45 slot, a 3 o'clock slot, a 3:15 slot, and a 3:30 slot. And then we'll finish with a conversation about these issues. And with the issues that we're now moving into: religious freedom, marriage, life. Okay, we're three legs of the stool organization here, and we're very excited about some of the ideas that we have to talk about right now. I'm going to introduce to you Mark Meadows, who's one of our great friends here at the Heritage Foundation. He is no longer a freshman of Congress. He came in 2012, so now he's a seasoned vet. But since coming into Congress, he's immediately taken to the conservative movement and has been always willing to be a leader for us in all the things that we're working on. Today, he's going to talk to us about the pro-life agenda in the House of Representatives. We are this is the 42nd anniversary coming up of Roe versus Wade. In that time frame, 60 million abortions have taken place. 60 million. And the thing that we see happening out there across the country is that more and more people are becoming pro-life. More and more people are recognizing that this isn't just a simple decision that is about one person. This is a decision about two people, and this is a decision about a real child. And so that tragedy has unfolded over the last 42 years, but I have great hope. And I think a lot of our speakers have great hope, and you'll see the reason for that as they come up and talk. Also on January 22nd, we're going to have the pro-life march here in Washington, D.C. I remember being a little kid and being bussed up here with my parents for that pro-life march, and it's always the most cold day of the year by far, but it's always a great event. So if you're around and can be a part of that, I would highly recommend it. But for now, let's have Congressman Meadows come up and talk to us about the fetal pain bill and the life agenda in Congress in general. Please welcome Congressman Mark Meadows.
Well, it is a privilege to be here with you and just share a little bit from my heart as we look at the life issue and truly as we start to address this. As Tim was mentioning, it's really the third stool for those that are conservative. And as we start to look at the 42nd anniversary of Roe v. Wade, this is one of the few areas that, as a social conservative, that there is progress being made, and hearts are being changed, lives are being changed, and in this particular issue, lives are being saved. And so I wanted to just share a little bit. You've got a panel that will be coming up that will talk about all of the technical detail. But what I want to do is give you a story of hope, a story of encouragement, and also about the importance of this particular bill that will be coming up on the House floor here in just a few weeks as we look at H.R. 36, which is the pain-capable bill that is really designed to limit abortions for those up to and exceeding 20 weeks. Now, when I say that, I have to take you to a story that really transformed my life and made me more pro-life. And so I want to take you back almost 23 years now, take you back to when my wife was actually pregnant with our firstborn son. And so as we were there, you get excited, and we were older first-time parents, and so my wife, as she was carrying my son, it started getting a little bit larger out front, and so I started talking to my son, and when I would do that, he would move around in the womb, and I could feel him press back, and I could feel him kick, and so then I got to the point where I would actually sing a song to him. And I would sing this song, and when I would do that, there was a response. There was no denying the fact that that was life and that there was a response to me. And my wife, who had been pro-life for many years prior to that, said, "Do you realize that it is legal for us to abort this child right now?" Well, I mean, that came as an unbelievable shock to me. And I said, well, how could that be true? Because for many people that have the argument about being pro-choice, what they're talking about is it's all about a choice. But for me, when I was in high school, we thought that that choice was within the first trimester, and it was only very limited. And so all of a sudden, my worldview started to get challenged. And it came to the fact that I was having to wrestle with what I knew was life, what I knew was responding to me, and yet having to come to a decision on how do I address that. Now, technology is helping millions of Americans start to have that same realization. We've got a sonogram now that is third and fourth generation. When you start to look at that, it really gives you a vivid picture. When they showed me the sonogram of my son 23 years ago, I looked at it and I said, well, which way is up? And, it was not real detail. That is not the case now. And so what's happened is technology is starting to tell the story. And when the story is told, when we start to tell the truth, the American people are responding. Because unlike many of the other things, on this particular issue, people are starting to say, we need to do something about it. Now, there have been studies that would suggest that a baby in the womb can feel pain at this particular point in the process. And not only feel it in such a way, and you'll have technical experts that will tell you, but not only feel it in such a way, but maybe a heightened sensitivity to that pain. And yet, we are all part of a very compassionate, caring country. When we look at this, we'll have a tsunami that may happen somewhere else, and many of us will reach deep into our pocket to give money to help somebody so far away that we'll never meet to do that. And yet, all of a sudden, we're faced with the reality of this particular issue that we need to identify and approach. And I say that because what I want us to do is to make this argument more about the people than the policy. Now, we're here today to talk about policy, and the fact is we will be debating this on the House floor. I expect it to pass the House as it has before. I expect it to be taken up in the Senate, and hopefully we will start to see the limitation on this horrific crime against the unborn, against someone who doesn't have a voice, be rolled back. And yet, for many of us, perhaps you, like me, we've been silent for far too long. It's been one of those things that you just don't talk about. You make sure that you just, you have your own personal convictions, but you don't talk about it. But what happens is with science, we're able to now start talking about it in real terms, in accurate terms, and we're starting to define that in a way that has never been defined before. Now, I say that because I've got a great son, and it could have been if we had different views 23 years ago, we may have made a very different decision. Now he's a student in law school and about to get married here in just a few months, and yet we see decisions that are being made each and every day. We also see horrific things that happen on our TV each and every day. With terrorism and everything else, we see acts of violence that we can't even describe to our kids. And yet, this as well has been an act of violence. And as Tim had shared, some 60,000 people that have been killed since that decision 42 years ago. 60 million, excuse me. And when we look at that, it's time that the American people stand up and say enough is enough. Now, we're here in the House, and you have a very large pro-life caucus. And yet, it is not enough to just talk about being pro-life. It's time that we put action to those words. And I think that you're starting to see that among a number of us. There are a few champions. You'll get to hear from some of them later today that Chairman Chris Smith has been a real advocate for life in every single aspect of what he does. He's a good friend of mine and works real solidly on this particular issue. But I share that because it's sometimes easy to give up hope and to say, you know what? It's not a fight worth fighting. You know, there's no way to win. There's no way to accomplish it. And I'm here to tell you today that that's not the case. We're seeing incremental changes each and every day that are making a big difference. So I want to close with just a couple of other notes and one story. You know, when we start to look at this particular issue, it is important that we understand the potential pain that so many of our neighbors and friends may have. My wife, as I was sharing today that I was coming here to give a speech on this, she says, well, did you know so-and-so had an abortion? And did you know this person had an abortion? And I had no idea as they would talk together and as they shared, but some of the emotional scars that are deep-seated and lasting are still there, and I see that, and that's something that we don't talk about enough either. So here's what I would ask you to do. I would ask you to not give up hope. On this issue, and you've heard from a lot of great speakers over the last 24 hours or so. You've had presidential candidates, or potential presidential candidates. You've had unbelievable people who are active in both the Senate and the House. But really, we're only a reflection of how active the people that we represent really are. You know, I'm fortunate enough to serve one of the greatest places in the country, the beautiful mountains of western North Carolina. And some of the greatest people, but my power rests in them as your representative and your senator. Their power rests in you. And so I'm going to close with this particular story. And it's a story about not giving up hope. It's one where we know the ending. And I love to share this story because we're right now celebrating the anniversary of the Star-Spangled Banner. And that anniversary really talks about the Stars and Stripes and where it got the beginning. And for most of you that know the story, you know that it was about Fort McHenry. And as it was there, the bombarding was going over and over and over again. For 25 hours, it kept on going. And Francis Scott Key, looking at that, seeing in the morning, expected to see what? A white flag of surrender. And yet, when he looked out that morning, what he saw were the Stars and Stripes still streaming. And when we see that, we can take that vision each and every day as we sing the Star-Spangled Banner. But you know what? That doesn't tell the whole story. Because the whole story really is the bombardment that was taking place there at Fort McHenry was because the British ships couldn't get close enough to really make those bombs effective. And the reason they couldn't do that is because 22 people sunk their boats in the harbor so that that ship couldn't get close enough to make it effective. 22 patriots sunk their boats for a lost cause. 22 patriots probably were told by their friends, what are you doing? It's a lost cause. You're sinking your boat. It's your livelihood. Many of them were fishermen. And yet 22 patriots decided that they needed to act. Now, I share that because many of you may have friends who are telling you that you're fighting for a lost cause. And I'm here to tell you today that just like we are able to sing about the Star-Spangled Banner because 22 patriots did an act, and when none of us know their names, perhaps you working with 21 of your fellow comrades to work on a particular issue that is not winnable might be winnable. And I'm here today to tell you that the voice of the American people has never been stronger. It's never been stronger on this particular issue. It's never been stronger really when it comes to just letting people know that they love their country and they're willing to fight for it. Yeah, I see over to my left you're going to get to hear from a great gentleman that I have a great deal of respect from, Congressman Mike Kelly. And so he brings together people, and we've met on this particular issue in another member's office to say, what can we do to be more pro-life and more active? And so I'm here today to ask you, are you willing to be one of the 22 who are willing to stand up and work arm in arm with someone else to fight for perhaps what some people call a lost cause? Because if you are on this particular issue, there's 60 million lives that could have been changed if we had just gotten to work a little bit sooner. It's an honor to serve you. It's an honor to be here today. And I thank you so much for letting me come and share a little bit from my heart. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Congressman Meadows. That was wonderful. Okay, now I get to introduce Congressman Mike Kelly. Congressman Mike Kelly, the Pittsburgh Tribune Review refers to Representative Kelly as Butler's straight talker. Pittsburgh Tribune Review is my hometown paper, too, so it's the good paper in that town. According to CQ Roll Call, any encounter with Kelly has the potential to erupt into a pep rally thanks to his gift for enthusiastic and rapid-fire communication. That's great news for us because straight talk is what we need more of in Washington, D.C. It's the duplicity and the doublespeak that people are tired of. So that is just very refreshing for us. He's establishing himself as a capable communicator, and that is a very good thing. Today he's going to talk to us about the Child Welfare Inclusion Act, which would protect child welfare providers from being discriminated against based on their religious beliefs or moral convictions. The chairman of the Conference of Catholic Bishops said this about Kelly's bill. Our first and most cherished freedom, religious liberty, is to be enjoyed by all Americans, including child welfare providers who serve the needs of our most vulnerable, children. The Inclusion Act would remedy this unjust discrimination by enabling all providers to serve the needs of parents and children in a manner consistent with their religious beliefs and moral convictions. We are proud to be strong supporters of this piece of legislation. Please welcome the Congressman to the stage.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate that, and thank you all for being here. I spent last summer, one day I had a chance to sit down with Dr. Fulner, and it was at a memorial service for Mr. Scaife, the Pittsburgh Tribune, and really had a chance to talk to Dr. Fulner a little bit more because I think that what Heritage does is so important. I don't know of another organization that protects the fundamental rights of who it is that we are as an American people. So that was really important for me. The other thing, in our staff, Tom Qualter worked here. Isaac Fong worked here. Robert Smith worked here. So we have a real strong Heritage Foundation that's right with us inside our staff. And also, there's a young lady by the name of Sue Ann Edmonston who's here, and she's been working on this piece for quite some time. I think that sometimes it's hard for us to understand why is it that you have to enact legislation that basically just says who we are as a people, who we've always been as a people, and yet we've seen things morph into something altogether different than we ever thought would happen. And when we talk about the Child Welfare Inclusion Act, I really find it hard to understand that in a town where policy is so important that we sometimes let politics overrun the basic policy. It just doesn't make sense. It's not who we are as a people. It's not who we ever will be as a people. And as long as there's people like Heritage, we can make sure that those things go on all the time. And in fact, the opportunity for all and favoritism to none is really pretty much right into the wheelhouse of what this piece of legislation talks about. And I didn't know this much about this. I will tell you this, though. In my family, my brother-in-law David and sister-in-law Michelle have a son, Eric, who's adopted. My brother-in-law Don and his wife Clorinda have a daughter, Amy Clorinda. My brother-in-law Victor and his wife Karen have both VK and Taylor, who were adopted. These are all people that wanted to have children. And for one reason or another, they weren't blessed with that. But they went to a faith-based organization in order to go through the adoption process. In our own office, Tim Butler, who works with us every day and is from Erie, Pennsylvania, his family, at one time, his mom had 3 foster care daughters, and Timmy, and I didn't know this, we were at a parade one day, and he said, I want you to meet my brother, Zion. And I said, oh, it's good to meet you. How you doing? But I didn't realize that Zion's not his biological brother. He's his adopted brother through a faith-based organization. So that brings us today. So what is it about the Child Welfare Inclusion Act? Why is that so important? And why would we even have to debate that? Because quite frankly, there's times at the end of the day, I sit back and I scratch my head and I raise my shoulders and say, this can't possibly be happening during our times in our country. So why is this so important? Well, here's why it's important. Because there's a move afoot right now, and it's just so, it goes against everything that I think we believe, that if you're faith-based, if you're a religious organization, in some states, you won't get to use that funding. If you fundamentally believe that a child should be raised in a home, in a traditional home, traditional marriage, with a mom and a dad, that somehow you're not the type of people who should be allowed to do that work. And if you're using any federal funds to do that, no. You're not going to be able to do that because the states get the money from the federal government and then they decide how to dole it out. But I want you to think about that. Why all of a sudden are we discriminating against faith-based people? Why are we discriminating against religious organizations? And if you were to look back in our history, who is it that has always been there to take care of children? Especially children that didn't have a mom and dad, didn't have a family to grow up in. It has always been our religious conviction. That's just who we are. We take care of the most vulnerable. We want to adopt those children. We want to be foster parents to those children. And some people, quite frankly, just feel very comfortable about saying part of our agency's work is that we believe placing a child in what we consider to be a traditional home with a mother and a father is the way we should go. I don't think that's a hard thing to understand. Where I do have a difficulty with this is that some people would say, well, no, because if you don't believe in some of the things that we believe, then you shouldn't be allowed to do that kind of work. And then you say, my goodness, this is not the way it was ever designed. Why would that be a problem? Why would you be willing to exclude faith-based and religious organizations? Why would you do that? And the answer is quite simple, because you don't agree with what we agree with. You don't believe what we believe. You believe in something different than we believe. And so we're going to penalize you for being that way. We're not going to allow you to participate or have the funding. Now, it doesn't happen everywhere. No, it doesn't happen everywhere. But it is happening in San Francisco. It is happening in Illinois. It is happening in Massachusetts. And it's happening right here in Washington, D.C. Really? Because of our religious convictions, we're being excluded? We're being told you can't participate? You can't look out for these children? You can't give them a home? You can't be an adoptive parent or a foster care parent? And why? Simply because you don't agree with what we state. Now, I don't know why that would be. And quite frankly, the piece of legislation that we're talking about is called the all-inclusive. It excludes none. It doesn't say if you don't believe what I believe, then you should be on the outside looking in. That's not what it says. All it says is everybody gets a seat at the table. If you choose, as a lot of my friends have chosen to do foster care and adoptive care, that you want to go through a church-based organization, a faith-based organization, then fine. That's fine. Because that's fundamentally how it all started. By the same token, if we don't stop this now, think of the implications as we go forward. Now, I represent a district back home. There's a place called Erie, Pennsylvania, and a big part of Erie, Pennsylvania is Presque Isle. Every year, Presque Isle worries about sand replenishment because the waves come in as the waves leave. They take part of the shore with them. The same thing's happening with our policies. It's not the first wave that's the problem. It's the continual battering of the shores that's the problem. Now I think, say, what is this guy talking about? I'm talking about fundamentally what we believe. If we don't stop it now, if we don't change the tide, if we don't stand up and say who it is that we are, not just from time to time, but every day, then we're going to lose. Just fundamentally who we are, our First Amendment rights. Why would anybody be able to step in and say, no, you don't get the funding? And quite frankly, I've never understood it. I don't discriminate against anybody. I know what I believe. I know how I was raised, and I know what I think works. Other people have different ideas, and I have no problem with that. That's fine. This is America. You can think that way. I'm not going to condemn you for that. I'm certainly not going to exclude you from any conversation. So why all of a sudden would the tables be turned? Why would we allow that to happen? Well, I mentioned Sue Ann earlier. 3 years ago, we sat down and we started to listen to what was going on. Here's what I thought, and I mean this. I'm a father of 4, been blessed with 10 grandchildren. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy being with them. Now, this past Christmas, the oldest, George, is 9. They're all Santa Claus people. They absolutely believe that there's a Santa Claus that comes, and they get so excited about it. And you see their faces as they're getting ready. They're making their list of things that they want, and they're talking about Santa Claus coming. And they have to be good, because if you're not good, Santa won't take care of you. But I watch their faces, their little faces, and I think, how lucky am I to have that opportunity to see that? That's the way I was raised also. But then I think about how many children just went through this past holiday that don't have that family feeling, don't have that table to sit at, don't have that tree to look at, don't have that opportunity to come down Christmas morning and be just overwhelmed by the joy of Christmas. And then the other part of it, and quite frankly the most important part for me, is be able to go and celebrate our Savior's birth. And say, yeah, it's fine to be excited about Santa Claus, but when we also understand the other part of what Christmas is, then you start to really get the meaning of it. I'm an automobile dealer, and so I just want you to understand that sometimes I start talking about products, and I really think you have to be able to sell the features and the benefits and the value in order to make the sale or to close the sale. I just want you to think about this inclusive, child welfare inclusive. The features and the benefits in there are for children. But not only for children, they're also for foster parents and adoptive parents. The joy that you have out of raising children, the joy that you have out of watching them grow, the feeling that you get of having made a difference in somebody's life, it should never be excluded that, well, because you don't believe what I believe, you don't get to do that. And federal taxes that we collect from all over the 50 states and that are distributed among the states individually, I don't think that San Francisco or Illinois or Massachusetts or Washington, D.C. has the right to tell you or your organization that you no longer are going to participate in this funding. It's just not who we are. And if we ever think that even the smallest fight is not important, then we're ceding who it is that we are. It all starts with one grain of sand. You've got to protect it all the time. Now, our piece just says this, look, if you want to do that, if you want to discriminate, if you want to be that entity, here's the trouble. You lose 15% of your funding. Because I firmly believe that until you hit people in the wallet, you can tell them, I don't think what you're doing is right, and they'll just shrug their shoulders. But you say, you know what, there's a penalty for doing it the wrong way. And this is what we fundamentally believe. We don't think that you should be discriminatory. We think everybody should be included. Every child should have an opportunity. Every family should have an opportunity to adopt or to be foster parents. It should not be based on their religious beliefs. And so I think that as we move forward on this, I look at it and I think we're challenged almost every day now as to who we are, and we look back on it. I got to tell you, at 66 years old, I look back in my life, and I truly was so fortunate to grow up in the best town at the best times with the best parents and preachers and teachers and coaches that a child could have had. They were all people that had come out of the Great Depression, had come through World War II, had made it through the really dark nights, and had gone through it basically the way most of us do, and that's on both knees. My dad used to say all the time, and I can remember us gathering as a family and kneeling down in the bedroom of my parents, the 5 of us with my mom and dad, saying our night prayers. Now people say, well, that's corny. No, it's not corny. It's not corny. It's who we are. It's what we believe. As I said earlier, we can never walk away from that. We can never, ever think that the fight we fight today is unimportant. that somehow we allow ourselves to be marginalized or be discredited or be discriminated against. That's not who we are. I will fight for everybody's rights as a human being. But I'm just saying in this case, we will stand up and we will be counted. We will make sure that faith-based and religious organizations are not penalized for believing what they believe. It's just fundamentally who we are. Our First Amendment addresses it very clearly. Very clearly. So I want to thank Heritage for giving me the opportunity to be here, but I also want to thank our staff because I got to tell you, they do marvelous work. And 3 of them coming from this organization, it just is who we are. It's part of the fabric that weaves our office together. We have people with really strong convictions and really believe in who it is that we are and what it is that we need to protect. So Heritage has been a big part of what I've learned early on, but also what you all do is incredibly important. And I just want you to know that there's quite a few people who believe the things that we believe. We don't always get a chance to stand up and talk about it, but when we do, we have to make the most of it. And you've heard from a number of people today, the fact that we talk about opportunity for all and favoritism towards none. I mean, is there anything more fundamentally American than that? So thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I guess so we're going to take some questions and answers. And this is pretty fundamental stuff. I mean, really what I'm talking about is nobody, I mean nobody, is going to be able to exclude us. Nobody. And by the same token, we're not saying that we should exclude anybody else either. I will just tell you, the people I've already told you about, I know them. I've seen them every day. I've seen them from the time they're tiny babies. I've been to their baptisms. I've been to their first communions. I've been to their graduations. I've been to their school plays. You would not know that they were not the biological children of the people who adopt them. So I just want to make sure we keep a really broad view of what it is that we're trying to do. Don't exclude us. Don't leave us out in the cold, and don't find fault for us because of what we fundamentally believe. So if there is some questions we're going to take, please. Yes, sir. One question? Okay, one question.
So for the states or for D.C. that did exclude faith groups, how does the bill get them to reverse that decision? Is it through?
Well, it's the funding. It's the lack of funding. I mean, you know, honestly, I mean this. Unless you hit somebody in the wallet, they usually don't respond. I mean, you can tell somebody what you're doing is not right. If you find them, I guarantee you they'll change. It's just the way I found out in my lifetime the way things work. But what we say is, listen, these are federal funds that are collected, given to the states, and the states pass them out. We're just asking the states, no, don't mess with our folks. So we tried to do this. It's a 15% penalty if they do those things. And I would just, I would hope that this starts to sink in. But I meant when I said earlier, it's just started off with these 4, but doesn't everything start off small and then get big? So let's just make sure we stand up for who we are all the time, not just partly. So thanks so much. Tim, thanks so much. Really a pleasure being with you.
Very much appreciate it. And yes, thank you to your staff too. Tom Qualteri used to work with me in Ed Fulner's office, and he's great. So thank you, Congressman. And sorry we didn't have time for more questions. We're recognizing that we've got 2 more great speakers here who have to vote very soon. So we'd like to get them on. Our next speaker, Congressman Raul Labrador, is going to pick up on this theme of religious freedom. Congressman Labrador is the lead in the House on the Marriage and Religious Freedom Act. The Marriage and Religious Freedom Act would prohibit the federal government from going after people based on their very simple belief that marriage is between a man and a woman. It's a tremendously important piece of legislation, unfortunately. It's sad that we need it, but we do need it. And we're at a place in time right now in our country where we need leaders who will stand up and who will protect folks who have who basically just want religious freedom, who want to be able to worship and live their lives as they feel so called. Congressman Labrador, as you all know, is a leader amongst the conservative movement. He's a bright young rising star in the conservative movement who is a very good communicator and who is often talked about as a potential leader in the future. And I think all of those whispers are very warranted. Please welcome Congressman Labrador to the stage.
Good afternoon. It's really great to be here. It's great to talk about these issues. Let me start off by thanking Heritage for putting on this summit.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talking to you and sharing ideas about what I believe will be one of the most important issues that we must address. And that issue is religious liberty and the growing threats to it. Regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, I think we can all agree that freedom of religion is one of our foundational values. And yet, like many of you, I am deeply concerned that this administration may begin to use the federal government to discriminate against individuals and organizations who believe in traditional marriage for religious reasons. The administration already has a history of imposing their ideas on religious and faith-based institutions. We all know about the HHS mandate on contraception. We also remember how the IRS targeted conservative and Tea Party groups, trying to take away their nonprofit status as part of a coordinated agenda. We should not assume the IRS or other federal agencies will be any friendlier to organizations that support and want to continue practicing traditional marriage. In fact, at the state level, we've already seen numerous examples how this is already moving in the wrong direction. In my district, in Idaho, we had a Christian couple who has performed over 35,000 traditional marriages at a wedding chapel in the resort city of Coeur d'Alene. Recently, they had to refile their tax status as a nonprofit religious corporation after some in the city argued that they could be compelled to officiate same-sex marriages. There are cases involving Christian adoption and foster care. I think we heard about some of those just a few minutes ago. Foster care agencies that have been forced to stop providing those services because they object to placing children in same-sex households. Still, other cases include a baker, a florist, a bed and breakfast, a t-shirt company, a student counselor, and the Salvation Army. In 2013, the California Senate passed legislation that would have removed from the Boy Scouts of America certain state-level tax exemptions and threatened similar groups who hold traditional views about marriage and sexual morality. It passed in the California by a vote of 27-9 before being tabled in the state assembly. These attacks on religious liberty are creating a climate of intolerance and intimidation for citizens who believe that marriage is the union of one man and one woman. I realize that the examples I've cited concern state law. My intent is to ensure that the federal government could not use federal law to threaten those institutions and individuals who believe in traditional marriage. That's why last Congress I introduced H.R. 3133, the Marriage and Religious Freedom Act, which would protect freedom of conscience on the issue of marriage. The bill had bipartisan support and over 100 co-sponsors. I am looking forward to reintroducing the legislation soon, and I expect a robust support in the new Congress and also a robust debate. The new bill will be narrowly tailored to prohibit the federal government from inappropriately targeting organizations or individuals who hold that belief that marriage is the union of one man and one woman. H.R. 3133 prohibited the federal government from making tax-exempt status contingent on a group's beliefs about marriage. No group should be denied or lose tax exemption because it has a belief that marriage is the union of one man and one woman, or that sexual relations should be reserved for marriage. My bill would also ensure that the federal government cannot deny or exclude a person from receiving any federal grant, contract, loan, license, certification, accreditation, employment, or other similar position or status. Tax-exempt status isn't just for those groups who win the favor of a particular government administration. While Americans are free to structure their personal relationships as state law permits, they should not use government to penalize those who think and act differently. Protecting religious liberty and the rights of conscience does not infringe on anyone's freedom. All Americans should be free to believe and act in the public square based on their beliefs about marriage without fear of any government penalty. All people should be treated with dignity and with respect. That includes not using the law or tax code to coerce and penalize those who seek to follow their conscience. To be clear, our bill will protect the religious freedom of anyone who believes that marriage is the union of one man and one woman, and it does not seek to take anything away from anyone. This is a great bill that conservatives, independents, libertarians can rally around. It can generate support in both parties, and that can actually, I think it can actually pass both houses of Congress and become law. And with your support, I think it can. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for
Absolutely.
coming. All right, thank you, Congressman Labrador. We're actually going to do it. We're going to get all these guys to their vote on time. So this is pretty impressive. We work on our feet here pretty quickly at Heritage. So, all right, as Congressman Meadows just said, Congressman Chris Smith has been a real lifelong advocate for the pro-life issues. Elected in 1980, serving his 19th term? 18th term in the House. He spent 32 years chairing the Bipartisan Pro-Life Caucus. He is a lead advocate not just on life issues, but also on the issues of human trafficking as well. We are very excited to have him here today. We're big supporters of his legislation and look forward to working with him on it. Please welcome him to the podium.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you to Heritage for hosting this very important meeting. And, you know, the elections have made a huge difference. We are now, I think, more optimistic than I have ever been, and I've been in Congress now for 35 years, that the life issues, the respect for the sanctity of human life and for marriage is something, especially given the fact that this administration and this president, he is the abortion president, we are in the process of turning this around. And of course, it's been through your help and through the grassroots and the never-ending work of the pro-life movement that has been the greatest human rights struggle ever. As I think you know, on September 9th, 2009, President Obama told lawmakers at a specially called joint session of Congress, and by extension the American public, that health care reform, that under our plan, as he put it, no federal dollars will be used to fund abortion. In an 11th hour ploy to garner a remnant of pro-life congressional Democrats absolutely needed for passage of the Affordable Care Act, the President issued an executive order on March 24th, 2010, and said, and I quote, "The Act maintains current Hyde Amendment restrictions governing abortion policy and extends those restrictions to newly created health insurance exchanges." Turns out that those ironclad promises by the President himself are absolutely untrue and ranks right up there with the President's oft-stated deception that if you like your health care insurance plan, you can keep it, dubbed PolitiFax's 2013 Lie of the Year. At its core, as you know, the Hyde Amendment has two indisputable parts. It prohibits direct funding for abortion and funding for any insurance plan that includes abortion except in the cases of rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother. Obamacare violates the Hyde funding by funding insurance plans and by paying for abortion on demand. Despite an appalling degree of non-transparency and obfuscation by the Obama administration, an extensive audit by the Government Accountability Office found in September that 1,036 Obamacare exchanges covered elective abortion. Again, he said that wouldn't happen. GA also found that separate billing of the abortion surcharge required by the Act is not being enforced, and the abortion funding premium, and again, this is in 2015 now, is being illegally rolled into the total plan cost. Healthcare consumers are therefore buying health insurance with little or no knowledge that they are purchasing abortion subsidizing plans. In my own state of New Jersey, every single plan on the exchange pays for abortion on demand, and sadly that is being replicated by many other states. When it comes to funding, public funding for abortion, the 2015 open enrollment is at least as bad, if not worse, than last year. It's never been about a website. Again, President Obama's solemn promise not to fund abortion on demand continues to be broken with impunity. It's not just a lie that was done once. It gets replicated year in and year out because what he said got the votes to procure enactment of that egregiously flawed legislation. Obamacare.com is Obamacareabortion.com is a website, and I ask you and encourage you to take a look at it, a very useful tool for healthcare consumers, and was created by the Family Health Research Council and the Charlotte Lozier Institute. The Obama administration's cover-up of abortion insurance plans on the exchange is absolutely unnecessary, it's unacceptable, and it is unconscionable. Consumers have a right to know abortion is not health care. It dismembers and chemically poisons defenseless unborn children and hurts their mothers. And the culture of denial that refuses to look at that fact and the fact that these children are killed and their mothers wounded needs to be displaced. And this Congress has an opportunity to bring legislation to the floor, which we will, that will not only seek to protect, but also seek to educate. Last year, the House passed H.R. 7, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion and Abortion Insurance Full Disclosure Act, which would end public funding for abortion while alerting in 2015, while alerting consumers which plans in 2014 had abortion in them. As you all know, Harry Reid refused to allow a vote on that legislation, and the President issued a statement of administration policy saying he would veto it. This Congress should be different. We are hopeful that the Senate will take up the legislation. We will take it up as well. And hopefully this legislation will, even if the President vetoes it, it'll be another step and another move in the direction of finally excising the killing of unborn children from abortion. One issue seems a bit esoteric, but it's not. When the legislation was going through the Senate, there was a big discussion about the Nelson Amendment, which said that two separate payments had to be made by the purchaser of that health plan, one for the premium itself and another for abortion, the abortion surcharge. This administration, and the GAO has confirmed this, but anyone who's in it knows it as well, and has a plan that includes abortion, makes no effort to enforce the law, and actually has admonished and advised the providers of health insurance on how they can conceal this, roll it all into the premium, and if they want to disclose it, you can, but certainly not an effort to follow what the law clearly said. It was Ben Nelson on the floor of the Senate who made it very clear and said, you have to write two checks, one to the insurance company for the abortion coverage and the other one for the rest of the premium. That's not happening. That disclosure, we believe, would have made at least some difference with people saying, I'm not writing a check to procure the death of unborn children. Another important piece of legislation that will come up is dealing with the whole issue of conscience rights. There is a massive movement in the United States and worldwide to compel all of us to be complicit in abortion. No matter how much objection, whether it be OBGYNs, whether it be health insurance providers, whether it be a purchaser of a premium, all of us need somehow to be involved, and we can't extricate ourselves from that complicity. There was a recent large meeting at Georgetown, and the O'Neill Institute and others put out a massive book on this attack on conscience rights. And we're seeing it happen here, we're seeing it happen everywhere. On August 22nd, California, their Department of Managed Health Care issued a new decree that says all of those plans under their authority, and that's just about every plan in California, must immediately, effective on August 22nd, pay for abortion on demand. That move, as I think most, if not all of you know, violates the Weldon Amendment, passed by Congress repeatedly since 2004. That legislation was authored by Congressman Weldon of Florida, a doctor himself, and it protects entities of all kinds, including individuals, from being compelled to be involved with abortion. The problem is it has one flaw, and we were unable to fix it for years in the appropriations process. The only remedy for an aggrieved party, an individual, like a nurse in New York, who was compelled to participate in a gruesome dismemberment abortion, took 4 years for her to get any kind of relief at a risk of losing her job, and many others who have been compelled. But in California, all the health insurers, including Catholics, Christians, evangelicals, every faith denomination, are being told now that your plan has to pay for abortion on demand. This isn't the exchanges. This isn't Obamacare. This is the existing plans, private sector plans and public interest plans like religious organizations. And the remedy is to go to the Department of Health and Human Services and have their Office on Civil Rights adjudicate your matter. Don't hold your breath on that one. The remedy also is for the HHS to withhold funding to California. Do you think that's going to happen? It will not. So we have legislation that would strengthen the Weld Amendment, the Abortion Non-Discrimination Act, and Congressman Fleming and Diane Black, she's the prime sponsor of it, an excellent bill that we have tried repeatedly to get passed in the Senate. We will pass it, I believe, in the House. And that provides a right of private action. So the church, the individual, the nurse, the doctor, whoever it might be, can assert their very substantial rights contained within the Weldon Amendment so that they don't have to be complicit in any way, shape, or form with the killing of unborn children and the wounding of their mothers. That legislation will be coming up soon in the House, and I do believe it will get a vote in the Senate because it must get a vote in the Senate. This is unconscionable to think that people are being coerced. What's all this choice talk when you're coercing people to be involved in abortion at every stage, funding it, providing facility for it, enabling it, or as going back several years ago to show you that this is nothing new. There was an effort that if you wanted to be an OBGYN before you were certified, there was a Clinton administration effort to say that wannabe doctor has to perform an abortion. Otherwise, you don't get certified. It was a terrible move by the Clinton administration. Tom DeLay offered the amendment in the appropriations process to a bill that stopped that. So this idea of coercion is embedded in the pro-abortion movement. It always has been. My wife and I have been in the pro-life movement for a collective number of 82 years. I've been in it for 42 years. The abortion itself is coercive for the baby. It certainly hurts the mother, but they want us all to be complicit in it. And I don't want to repeat myself, but it really is a serious, serious attack by the proponents of abortion. The Abortion Non-Discrimination Act would remedy that. And I know, am I out of time? One last thing is, our leadership, and I want to just thank Kevin McCarthy for, one, keeping us in session during the March for Life, something we have pleaded with previous leaderships and didn't always get, so that members can talk, and those who march in the March for Life can talk to their individual senators and House members. But he's also scheduled for next week important legislation authored by Trent Franks that will do what some states have already done, and that is ensure that pain-capable unborn children defined in the bill at approximately 20 weeks. I do believe that pain can be felt before. There is some scientific evidence, but at least at 20 weeks onward, those children would not be subjected to DNXs and other horrific procedures that are violence. And now we know, beyond any reasonable doubt, those children feel it, at least in the beginning. It was Dr. Sunny Anand who was very involved in anesthesia for unborn children, and many others now that have come forward that say that when they do prenatal surgery, microsurgery, and do things that are life-enhancing for the unborn child, there needs to be anesthesia, because we now know the child experiences pain, and it's pain that exceeds what even a newborn or a 5-year-old or people of our age might experience, because the pain receptors are so close to the skin. And to think that that child would be subjected to a process, a procedure that is anything but benign, that dismembers the arms, the legs, decapitates, it is barbaric, the DNX method, as are other methods. But at least under this legislation, after 20 weeks, they would not be permitted except in the most extreme cases. So that is a huge step in the right direction. Trent Franks was the prime sponsor last Congress. We got it passed, got a majority vote in the House, and this time it'll come up, and I believe next week it will pass, because people are waking up. The culture of denial is being replaced with a culture of enlightenment, and abortion is violence against children and injurious to moms. Thank you so much.
Congressman, thank you so much, and thank you for your passion. It means a lot, and we're happy to be fighting with you. So thank you. Hopefully you make your vote. Okay, well, now I would like to, we're going to take the two panels that we had combined for this afternoon and two panels that we had this afternoon and combine them into one. So I'd like to invite our panelists up now. Ryan Anderson is the William E. Simon Fellow in Religion and a Free Society here at the Heritage Foundation. Carrie Kupek is the Legal Communications Director at the Alliance for Defending Freedom. Chuck Donovan is the President of the Charlotte Lozier Institute and a Heritage alum. And Sarah Torre is a policy analyst here at the Heritage Foundation. I think what we'd like to do is we'd like to have folks all kind of give an introductory comment. And we'll go with Sarah, and then Chuck, and then Carrie, and then Ryan. And Ryan will moderate our Q&A afterwards. So any questions that you had for the members, you can ask our panel afterwards. Thanks.
Sure. So I'll just focus in on basically the details of some of Representative Chris Smith's remarks. Chuck here has done an incredible amount of work on the 20-week bill, so he'll go more into detail with that. And I'd like to specifically focus on the last piece of legislation that Representative Smith mentioned, the Abortion Non-Discrimination Act. This is not just an issue in California, as he mentioned. Over the past 5 months, both California and D.C. have passed mandates and pieces of law that would basically force pro-life Americans to enroll in a health plan and pay for a health plan that covers surgical abortions. Over the past year or so, we've had a lot of discussion about the HHS mandate, about being forced to provide coverage of the abortion-inducing drugs in that case. Here we're talking about surgical abortions, the kind of abortions that Representative Smith and Representative Meadows were just talking about, these dangerous and very violent procedures. This is a clear violation of conscience for people who believe it and know the truth that these children are human beings who have an inherent right to life, an inherent worth and dignity. We've done a couple interviews here with a couple of churches, actually, in California who are being forced to provide coverage of surgical abortions, even though that goes against their deeply, deeply held beliefs. Just this past month in D.C., the council there also passed a bill that would basically force employers to cover elective abortions in their plans. There are no religious exemptions to what is called the Reproductive Health Non-Discrimination Act, a very ill-named act. It basically would prohibit employers from discriminating in any compensation terms, conditions, privileges of employment on the basis of an individual's reproductive health decision-making, which includes very specifically the termination of a pregnancy. This is a clear violation of what Representative Smith mentioned as the Weldon Amendment that protects the conscience rights of pro-life Americans and all Americans from being forced to participate in, whether it's through just providing health care coverage or actually participating in abortion, protects their conscience rights not to be forced by the government to do that. And so the Abortion Non-Discrimination Act, as he mentioned, would provide the ability of for individuals to go into court to have that rectified. You wouldn't have to wait on what is basically the DMV of conscience in the Department of Health and Human Services, their Office of Civil Rights, that takes about 1 to 3 years to actually respond to complaints of having your conscience rights violated. So this is one of the primary things that the pro-life movement will be working on this year, and really marks a trying to get back to a truce in the debate over abortion over the past 40 years has been that regardless of what you think about it politically or morally, that we should all agree that no one should be forced to pay for or participate in an abortion. That's what this law protects against, and hopefully a slight tweak to it will protect against even more. So I'll let Chuck talk more about the 20-week bill as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And I want to thank the Heritage Foundation for reserving time today for the discussion of one of the most important pieces of legislation I think the Congress has ever considered. Why is there pain-capable legislation pending in the Congress? Well, probably the chief instigation of that was the trial of Dr. Kermit Gosnell several years ago in Philadelphia, a physician who was found to have committed what I can only describe as atrocities in a clinic that was unregulated by the state, and in which he ended the lives of babies both on the brink of being able to survive outside the womb, as well as several, a couple of whom he was convicted in connection with, who were capable of living, did live outside the womb, and he ended their lives. In international perspective, and this is one of the studies the Lozier Institute has done in a paper I recommend to everyone by Angelina Nguyen, we stand in the international stage as a radical nation with respect to our abortion law. I don't think most Americans reflect on this, but there are only 4 countries in the world where abortion on an elective basis is permitted up until birth. Canada is the other democracy that allows this. The other 2 countries are North Korea and the People's Republic of China. There are 3 other countries that permit it after 20 weeks. So even if, and we certainly hope that Congress will pass this legislation, we'll still be among the 7 most permissive nations in the world with respect to these laws. It's a mark of shame upon us. I like to think about all of the times that people a little left of center in political life have pointed to international standards and said, whether it's torture, whether it's capital punishment, whether it's a whole set of rights, some of which we have contests over, we should adopt the international norm. Well, when it comes to this issue, the United States is radically out of step with the international norm. And my final point about this, and I think it's pretty straightforward, we never got to the national policy we have on abortion on request until birth by an act of the American people. It was done by our courts, same way that Canada did it. And I think it's obvious from 230 pro-life laws passed in the states in just the last 4 years that this policy would never have been adopted by the common consent of the American people, acting through the Congress or through state legislatures. So what the Congress is doing by addressing the scientifically sound situation of pain-capable children is beginning the process of redressing a grievance when this issue was taken out of the realm of reasoned debate and turned into an issue for judges to decide. And in this case, they made a very radical call that the American people are signaling time and again went way too far. It's not where we are. It's not our character. We need something better. So hopefully, beginning next week, the Congress will adopt this legislation and put the American people and the nation back on a sounder footing in defense of vulnerable children.
Hello, my name is Carrie Kupak, and as was mentioned, I work for Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a nonprofit First Amendment law firm. And right now we're seeing a very concerning trend within the areas of religious freedom and speech. And as Representative Labrador alluded to, we are seeing the government coming in and essentially strong-arming private citizens to promote or celebrate messages with which their religion and conscience just do not allow them to do. We're seeing this specifically in the area of same-sex weddings, and I'd like to share with you today a story of one of our clients who we're actually waiting right now any minute for a ruling from the judge out in Washington State. And this is our 70-year-old florist, Baronelle Stutzman. Now, she's been in the floral industry for 40 years. She loves designing flower arrangements. This is her life. This is her passion. This is who she is. And she had a longtime customer named Rob who identifies as homosexual, and he and his partner would come in, and Baronelle happily arranged flowers for him and his partner. She provided flowers for them for, I think, about 9 years. They developed a close relationship, and Baronelle will tell you that they're good friends. Well, Rob decided to get married to his partner, and they came in and they asked Baronelle if she would do the flowers for their wedding. Now, this was not an easy decision for Baronelle. She has a close relationship with this man, and she would tell you if she was here, she really agonized over it. It's easy to kind of talk about these things from a distance, but when you're up close and personal with someone who you care and love, and Baronelle has even said recently that she loves Rob, this is a hard decision. But she prayed about it, and as she told Rob when he came in, because of her relationship with Jesus, she said she couldn't do it. And she felt badly about it, but she just couldn't do it because of her faith and her conscience. Rob said he understood, was disappointed. Baronelle referred him to other florists in the area. They hugged, and that was it. Well, the Attorney General got wind of this in the media and decided to sue Baronelle. Unfortunately, right after that, Rob and his partner decided to sue Baronelle as well. Now, what makes this case particularly unique, now, as it was mentioned earlier, you know, we have bakers, we have florists, we have photographers, we have people who have an event venue that hosts weddings. This is a little bit of a unique lawsuit, and it's very concerning because the Attorney General is currently suing Barronelle, not just in her business capacity, in her corporate form, but in her personal capacity as well. So this means that if Barronelle loses this case, that she doesn't just stand to lose her business and her source of income. She's going to lose her house. She's going to lose everything she owns. This 70-year-old woman who took over this floral business from her mother who had Alzheimer's, who this is her love, this is her life, this is her passion, because she holds a Christian view on marriage, is now looking to lose her house. The judge just ruled last week that this personal capacity suit can go forward. We're waiting for the remainder of the other decisions at the trial court level really any minute. But this is something very concerning because, and I think we'd all agree that if the government can force any one of us to celebrate or promote a message which our faith and conscience just says we cannot do, surely they can force us really to do anything. And right now the hot topic message, discussion is same-sex marriage, but in 20 years from now, who's to say what that's going to be? But at that point, it's going to be too late because the door will have been opened, the precedent will be set, and the government can force anyone to promote a message that's at odds with their beliefs.
I just want to say a couple things about the two pieces of legislation that Representative Kelly and Representative Labrador spoke on. The Child Welfare Inclusion Act and the Marriage and Religious Freedom Act are common sense pieces of legislation that more or less protect the way in which America has operated for the past 200+ years. They take away nothing from anyone, and they simply protect the religious liberty rights of Americans who believe that marriage is the union of a man and a woman, and who seek to lead their lives in accordance with that belief, to run their businesses in accordance with that belief, and to run their charities, especially foster care and adoption agencies, in accordance with that belief. Free from government harassment, free from government penalties, free from government coercion. These are bills that should garner support from all Americans, whether you're personally in favor of redefining marriage to include a same-sex relationship, or whether you prefer keeping the historic definition of marriage. All Americans should agree that the government shouldn't be discriminating against Americans who believe what every American had believed about marriage up until a decade ago. This is something that the nation can really rally around to find a peaceful coexistence, a principled way of pluralism as we work through this contentious issue. The story that Carrie just told us out of Washington State need not happen. It should not happen. We should see policy like MARFA, the Marriage and Religious Freedom Act, enacted at the state level and at the local level. The piece of legislation that Representative Kelly will, or that Representative Labrador will introduce again in this Congress would prevent it from happening from the federal government. It would prevent the IRS from stripping someone's tax-exempt status. It would prevent the government from discriminating in grants or contracts or accreditation against institutions who believe that marriage is the union of a man and a woman. And this is good policy. Likewise, on Representative Kelly's bill, the Child Welfare Inclusion Act, this will hopefully prevent some of the discrimination that we have seen at the state level. As he mentioned, this bill uses the funding mechanism to say that if a state's going to discriminate against a Catholic Charities adoption agency or an evangelical adoption agency or Latter-day Saint adoption agency, they're going to lose 15% of their federal funding. You can't take federal money and then discriminate against religious adoption agencies that are simply seeking to find homes with married moms and dads for children. Discriminating against these agencies does nothing to help children who need families. All it does is score a point in an adult culture war. So again, these are good pieces of legislation, but I want to close just by saying one thing that kind of unifies all of the issues on this panel, and it unifies it with the theme of this policy summit, which has been opportunity for all, favoritism for none. One way, probably the primary, most foundational way in which the government can protect opportunity for all is by protecting the opportunity to be born. The reason that Chris Smith spoke about the 20-week pain-capable abortion ban is to protect every child's right to life. Right now, the common sense piece of legislation is to at least protect the child's right to life at week 20. But ideally, we want to see every child welcomed in life, protected by the law. That's what opportunity for all looks like. And preventing favoritism to anyone, favoritism to the abortion lobby. They shouldn't be able to use the government to coerce other people to be complicit in abortion. That's what Representative Meadows was pointing out. On the marriage front, how do we protect opportunity for all? It's by protecting the institution of marriage to maximize the likelihood that every child has the opportunity to be raised by his or her married mother and father. How do we fight against favoritism to some? By preventing the government from coercing the evangelical florist that Carrie just spoke about into violating her beliefs. No one has the right to have the government coerce other people into celebrating their relationships. So that's one way of thinking about how that phrase of opportunity for all, favoritism to none, unifies these issues. And so with that, we'll open it to the floor for any questions. Unfortunately, the members of Congress had to go back to vote, but the panelists will do our best to answer your questions. Yep, in the back.
Thank you. The opportunity for all, why should that exclude the children who are conceived in rape?
In theory and in practice, it shouldn't. I think we all can name, at least if you've read any large body of literature, a wide number of people who were conceived in rape. Their stories are as compelling as anyone. I like to point out the fact that we're all agreed that in terms of planned pregnancies and so forth, that a good 15 to 20% of anyone in a room at a given time was a bit of a surprise to their parents. We've kind of accepted the mantra. I'm not asking you to hold up your hands. You may not know. But if you lived any length of time, you know that ideal conception is a little bit different from the real world. We want to translate our revulsion, our appropriate revulsion, complete revulsion at several things. That rape exists, that it's largely underreported, it is certainly underprosecuted. In terms of things that are prosecuted, it's exceptionally grueling for the woman to have to go through a trial in which everything about her will be questioned, and that's reflected in all of the data. So there's a tendency, I think, and it's proven in polls, I suppose, that the public wants to make an exception there. They don't want the woman to have to go through that. They also think that the government really can't get at protecting the life of the child. My question for people who say it's okay, well, would you go back and take the life of Ethel Waters and say it wasn't worth a thing? She was conceived in rape. What about Jesse Jackson? Well, we're conservatives. No humor is really permissible here. But at the end of the day, we protect life because it is life. And the degree to which we've gotten away from treating children equally and accepting some because they're wanted, and accepting others because they're not, or a child is handicapped, we say their life can be shortened or taken. I think our country is cheapened by that, and we do need to find a way to speak about it. We also need a way to demonstrate that we passionately care about the fact that there is so much demeaning of women in our society, and rape is a prevalent problem, no matter how often something like Virginia may happen. It's just something that we have to do an awful lot better job, because we are harming women and really disrespecting them at all levels by saying these crimes cannot be prosecuted well, we can't prevent them, and we can't protect the unborn child who is occasionally conceived in these situations, which certainly happens. Yes, sir. I don't know who's going.
We'll go here and then here.
Eric, I can get to respond to this recent Frank Bowie op-ed where he argued that religious freedom laws are, the purpose of them is to give religious groups a privileged status in the United States and so they can discriminate against gays.
Yeah, sure, I'd like to respond to that, and I'm sure Ryan would have something to say about that as well. The big problem with that statement is that we cherish and value religious freedom in this country. I mean, that's really one of the reasons this country was founded in the first place, right? People came over because they didn't have that freedom anymore. So to say that that's what's going on with that is not just, it undermines the very core of this nation, but also it's a big concern because right now we're seeing a complete unbalance, right? There should be balance. I mean, it's tricky. everyone has First Amendment rights, and how does this all play out sometimes? And this is where it can get challenging. But right now we're seeing the scales sort of go like this, where people who have deeply held religious beliefs and convictions and just these things that they have lived out their entire lives are suddenly being told by judges and state governments, too bad, it doesn't matter. Your First Amendment rights don't matter anymore. And that's a big problem. And that's why the state RFRA laws, the Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, what they do is they restore balance in these problems, and they allow it to go to court if it should go there, and that gets all diced out. But right now, there's a complete lack of balance, and there's a complete discrimination, really, effort against those people who do live according to their faith and conscience.
I'll just add one comment to that. I'll read you the last two sentences in the Bruni op-ed. He says, "I support the right of people to believe what they do and say what they wish in their pews, homes, and hearts. But outside of those places, you must put up with me just as I put up with you." And there are two fundamental problems with this. First of all, the free exercise of religion, what the founders intended to protect, is not limited to our homes, our pews, and our hearts. Michelle Obama has probably said this best when she said, religious faith is also what we do Monday through Saturday. It's not just about showing up on Sunday for a good meal and good music. It's what we do Monday through Saturday as well. And so the beginning, what we're seeing here is a redefinition of religious liberty, the free exercise of religion, to the mere freedom of worship. That what you do Sunday morning in your church or in your home and in your heart, that's protected. But once you step out in the marketplace, once you step out in the public square, you have to leave your faith behind. And thankfully, the Supreme Court has rejected that argument repeatedly, most recently in the Hobby Lobby decision. So the first response to the New York Times is that you've just simply gotten the law wrong. The second is that last sentence, you must put up with me just as I put up with you. But that's not really what he's asking for. What he's saying is, I have a right to force you to violate your beliefs and to bake me my wedding cake or to take my wedding photos, this, that, and the other thing. The live and let live position here is the position of Carrie's client, Baronell. She's saying, I'm not going to interfere with you and your wedding ceremony, just don't make me complicit in it. She's not saying that no baker in the state of Washington can bake them a wedding cake. She's saying, live and let live. Please just go somewhere else. And actually, I said bake a wedding cake. In this case, it's make the floral arrangements, because these cases involve so many different professionals whose professional life intersect with the wedding industry. And the principled solution to this is a live and let live solution, in which if you're in favor of same-sex weddings, bake the same-sex wedding cake or take the flowers, but if you're against them, don't be coerced by the government. So Frank Bruni has misunderstood two core American values here with that op-ed. And thankfully, these bills that Representative Labrador and Representative Kelly have mentioned would help rectify that situation. Other question? Yeah, we're going to go right here.
Sorry. Oh, it's sort of a complicated question, so bear with me. I know that religious conservatives keep expressing indignancy about having to support, latex barriers that hinder the movement of sperm and eggs in wombs, but they seem to have no problem wanting the taxpayers to spend billions of dollars on steel and concrete barriers to control the movement of life after it's born. Would not a greater, more effective use of latex now preclude having to spend more on steel and concrete later, like along our borders? Why do religious conservatives want everyone to be open to the creation of new human life if after that life has been created, they decide that life is such a nuisance, we have to build expensive barriers to control the movement of that life? Thank you.
I'll take a stab at that. I think that it's one of the main things that governments do is to protect our national security, and part of that is to protect our national boundaries. And so protecting the border is a legitimate function of government. We take no position here at the Heritage Foundation about the morality of contraception, and it's completely legitimate for religious people to have various views about the morality of contraception without the government coercing them one way or the other. And so the problem with the Hobby Lobby, or the problem with the HHS mandate, the good thing about the Hobby Lobby ruling was that the government was trying to coerce people on their religious beliefs about those matters. And right now we see the Little Sisters of the Poor are still in federal court suing the Obama administration because the Obama administration is coercing them with their religious beliefs about contraception. So it's not appropriate for the government to harass the Little Sisters of the Poor and their religious beliefs about contraception, it is appropriate for the government to care about our national security and our borders. Yep, right here.
Thank you so much. Could you briefly comment, probably Ryan and Carrie, on the recent expansion of states where it's now become legal to have so-called same-sex marriage due to the Supreme Court's really inaction, and kind of where we're headed from here with that?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to this idea of government coercion. And the thing is, the big picture, taking a step back from same-sex marriage and everything else, is that, again, if the government can come in and can force someone to celebrate a message, to paint a picture, to design a T-shirt, to create a floral arrangement, to bake a cake, that has to promote something that just completely is at odds with their faith, with their conscience, we're headed for some big trouble. And right now, like I said, as we all know, that same-sex marriage is really something that is right there, is the hot button issue. And for instance, in Colorado, our client, Jack, the baker, Masterpiece Cake Shop, the Civil Rights Commission out there actually compared him to a Nazi or a slave owner for declining to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. This guy has his shop closed on Sundays. He doesn't create Halloween goodies, I guess, and now he's being compared to a Nazi. This is a big problem, and it's very concerning. And again, it's a speech issue. It's a religious freedom issue. With the government come in and force that, them to do that, who's to say in 20 years what the government can force any of us to do?
On the smaller question of what are the future of these state marriage laws, there are really two questions in this debate. One is, what is marriage? And then the other question is, who gets to decide what marriage is? Marriage should be decided by the people and their elected representatives. Unelected judges should not be striking down good state marriage laws and then redefining marriage for that state. And that's what we've seen in a host of court cases over the past 2 years, is that people went to the polls, they debated, and then they voted about marriage. They defined what marriage is, and then unelected judges threw those votes out. And so the first right, the right to vote, be a member, a participant in the political process, has been discarded by the courts. So what we would like to see is the courts to respect the constitutional authority of citizens and their elected representatives to make marriage policy, and we would like to see citizens and their elected representatives make marriage policy based upon the truth of what marriage is as a union of a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, a mother and a father. Other questions? Yep, all the way back here.
With millennials being brought up on a steady diet of political correctness between pop culture and education, my concern is the issues you're talking about, we're dying off. Like the generations that care about this, they're dying off. And so we have these millennials now, and how are you guys winning them over with this? Because I don't think that the idea of saying that marriage is between a man and a woman to a 20-year-old, and I had my niece just recently freak out when I said that, like I was a horrible person for saying that, and I'm so old and draconian. How are you reaching them and making them understand we're not bad people because we have certain religious convictions or traditional values?
I'll take a first stab at that. I noticed you directed that question on the marriage side of thing and not the right to life side of thing. On all the, but all right, so I would put it this way. I could envision someone asking a question very much like yours 40 years ago, right after the Roe v. Wade decision, saying, look at all the young people, they're turning against you on the right to life. The only people who are opposed to abortion are the elderly, and a generation from now there won't be a pro-life movement. That could have been a possibility. But instead, courageous pro-lifers really got to work. They started organizing. Right after the Roe v. Wade decision, we had the first March for Life. 42 years later, next week, we'll have another March for Life. And when you look at this, you will see several 100,000 people marching, and the vast majority of them will be millennials. And that's how it's been more or less since the beginning. And what's amazing right now is when you look at the public opinion polling on abortion, it's that my generation is more pro-life than my parents' generation. And so there's no reason why the same thing can't happen on the question about marriage. My generation never has had to think through very critically what marriage is. We've largely lived in a culture that has made a mess of marriage. So we come of age after the sexual revolution, after the introduction of no-fault divorce, where the majority of our contemporaries are born outside of marriage. It's not surprising that we're confused about what marriage is, but that's no reason to give up on it. Serious work can be done making the case for what marriage is and why it matters and why we ought not redefine it, and why in those states where it has been redefined, why we ought to reclaim the truth about marriage. And it may take a decade, it may take 4 decades, but that's the work that we have to do. And the way that we're doing that is through a host of medium. I mean, it's through panel discussions like this, it's through campus speaking. In the past 2 years, I've been at probably 50 or 60 college campuses and law schools, including Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, NYU, another 50 or so. I mean, so there are a variety of ways. ADF, where Carrie works, has produced a series of wonderful videos trying to explain this in short little video clips. There's a March for Marriage, which has started. Hopefully there'll be culture makers that will do the same in film and radio and TV. Everyone has a role to play here in bearing witness to the truth about marriage, just like everyone had a role in the Right to Life movement. And so maybe Sarah or Chuck would want to say some of the techniques that they did, because that movement really has proven successful.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think of just the hundreds of thousands of Americans, as Ryan said, that'll be here in D.C. Next week, how a broad cross-section of the pro-life movement that is. You'll have people who run the 2,000 pregnancy centers across the country that are providing really the day-by-day material and emotional support to women who are facing unplanned pregnancies or saving lives, right? Sort of on the front lines. People who have done films. I think of Jason Jones and his entire movement with Bella and Crescendo and other movies. You've had this infusion into culture of the truth about the human life and infusion of the ultrasound videos that Mr. Meadows talked about. You've really had, in every level of culture and law and physical support, you've seen people in the pro-life movement step up and provide that kind of support, provide a witness to the truth about human life. And you're going to need that in all of these cultural issues, especially marriage. It took us 40 years to get here. We're certainly not over. We have many, many challenges facing us in the pro-life movement, but it'll take all of those components to make that case.
If I could do a little product placement for the Heritage Foundation, they have an incredibly good publication called The Index of Cultural Indicators, came out last June. It'll be out again. And I think people don't necessarily realize that the abortion rate's dropped by over a third since its peak about 20 years ago. It is now, with the latest data in 2011, it is back to the 1972-73 level, pre-Roe v. Wade. So this has happened through legislation, yes, pregnancy centers, cultural change. There's sort of an inverted pyramid emerging with millennials who are more pro-life. They are indeed more tolerant or accepting of same-sex marriage in the short run. But I've grown up with a generation that was less pro-life, but has lived, I think, and seen some of the consequences of it. It has not been stabilizing for the family. It hasn't produced perfect, privileged, and wonderful children any more than the previous generation did. And there's an openness to reconsideration. Something like 70% of the American people think the 20-week legislation is a good idea. And the figure is higher for women than men. A great article in the Washington Post showing that women are more supportive of this. We need to continue to have reasoned debates, move legislation that people can agree upon, and we also have to show that it works, that it's effective, and without deleterious consequences. In the case of the life issue, I think it's an example of how to continue to press on a difficult issue and make progress, because people re-listen. They may not listen intently over the short run, but there's an openness to re-listen as we see what certain decisions have wrought. So I think we need to advance that way.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, thank you all for joining us for this panel, and I'll invite Tib Chapman up for some closing remarks.
Great.
Thank you, panelists. It was a great discussion. All right, we've reached the end of our conference, and it's been a wonderful conference. I thank you all for attending. I want to say thanks to our security team, thanks to our events team, thanks to all the folks at Heritage Action and Heritage who have worked on this. It's been great. Thanks to our Sentinels, many of our Sentinels who made the drive to Washington. So thank you. Good stuff. This has been very exciting. I just want to rattle off a couple of numbers for you all. We had 20 members of Congress here that you were able to interact with. We had 24 policy experts from the Heritage Foundation. We had 400 people attend here in person in the auditorium. We've had so far more than 2,000 stories on the wires, on the news wires, covering this event. We've had 30,000 online viewers on our live stream, which has doubled our viewers, almost doubled our viewers of 17,000 from last year's event. And we've had 3 million impressions so far on the hashtag #OptForAll. So our message is getting out there. We're very excited about the opportunity for all, favoritism for none message. And we look at this event as the kickoff to a very important year in 2015, where again, what we do in 2015 reverberates in 2016 and becomes the mandate that we want in 2017. Thank you all for being here. Bye-bye.